social media. It's not just about the platforms themselves.
To the preservation of the national unity and democratic stability.
Water is life, water is an essential service, and we must have to carry out the residents.
Local communities are not only vital to the growth of society, but they also form the bedrock of humanitarian development.
Hello and welcome to The Reporter, a news and current affairs program that goes beyond the headlines, bringing reporters from the field to give first-hand accounts and in-depth analysis of unfolding issues, correspondents' perspectives, ensuring balanced, credible, and comprehensive storytelling. Welcome once again. I am Anyeti Patrick. It's good to have you join us on this episode of the program, The Reporter. On this edition of the program, the chairman of the Kano State Multi-Agency Task Force on Drug Abuse, Barrister Moyi Rimi Gado, has appealed to media organizations across the state to strengthen collaboration with the committee in tackling the growing menace of substance abuse. Speaking during a strategic meeting with reporters and correspondents from various media organizations in Kano, Barrister Rimi Gado described drug abuse as one of the major factors fueling violence, criminality, and other social vices across the state. Global TV correspondent Idris Jibri has more.
The task force was established by the Kano state government following the declaration of a state of emergency on substance abuse. The committee was created to coordinate a comprehensive response to the challenges of drug trafficking, distribution, and abuse through collaboration among government institutions, security agencies, civil society organizations, and community leaders. Chairman of the committee, Barrister Moyi Magajiri Mungadu, said the task force is committed to identifying the root causes of drug abuse, strengthening enforcement against traffickers and distributors, promoting public awareness campaigns, and recommending lasting policy measures that will address the problem across the state. He stressed that the media has a critical role to play in educating the public, exposing drug-related crimes, and supporting efforts aimed at protecting communities from the devastating effect of illicit substances.
This is a committee that was initiated by the state government looking into the incessant problem of drug abuse, illicit trafficking, and gang violence.
He noted that no single institution can win the fight against drug abuse alone, emphasizing that sustained cooperation among the media, security agencies, religious and traditional leaders, parents, and the general public is essential to achieving lasting success.
If you look at the prevalence of drug abuse in Kano, in 2025, last year, the Kano State Police Command, based on the statistics they have established about 3,080 arrests of major crimes across the state. And 70% of these arrests has been attributed to drug abuse.
The multi-agency task force is expected to work closely with relevant security agencies and other stakeholders to develop practical and sustainable strategies that will curb the spread of illicit drugs, reduce drug-related crimes, and safeguard the future of young people in Kano State. From Kano, Idris Jibrin, Global Television News. The task force.
Still staying with Kano State, the federal government has reaffirmed its commitment to modernizing Nigeria's aviation infrastructure with the commissioning of the remodeled and upgraded Muhammadu Adamu Dankabo domestic terminal of the Malamaminu Kano International Airport. The project is expected to improve passenger experience, strengthen regional connectivity, and support economic growth in northern Nigeria. Again, Global TV's correspondent Idris Jibri tells us more.
The arrival of the Minister of Aviation and Airspace Development, Festus Keyamo, alongside the Minister of State for the Federal Capital Territory, Maria Bunkure, marked the beginning of the official commissioning ceremony at the Malam Aminu Kano International Airport. Also in attendance were the Chairman of the Board of the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, Abdullahi Omar Ganduje, the Managing Director of FAN, Olubunmi Kuku, members of the Governing Board, and other senior government officials. The remodeled Muhammad Adamu Dankabo Domestic Terminal is part of the federal government's nationwide airport upgrade program aimed at enhancing safety, operational efficiency, and passenger comfort across Nigeria's airport.
60% of this money has been released already, and the contractors are on site. As I speak with you, the contractors are on site.
Chairman of the FAN board, Abdullahi Omar Ganduje, commended the federal government for prioritizing critical infrastructure, saying the upgraded terminal will strengthen Kano's position as a commercial and transportation hub for the northern Nigeria. He says the terminal upgrade will equally provide a more efficient, secure and comfortable travel experience while reinforcing the airport's role in driving economic development and regional integration.
This project represents much more than the rehabilitation of a physical structure. It symbolizes progress, renewed commitment, and our collective determination to build an aviation sector that meets the expectations of Nigerians.
The managing director of FAN, Olubunmi Kuku, described the airport as one of the Nigeria's oldest and most strategic aviation hubs, serving Kano and neighboring states while connecting northern Nigeria to the rest of the country. She disclosed that the airport currently handles more than 500 domestic passengers daily, making the rehabilitation project essential to improving service delivery and meeting growing passenger demand. Kuku also revealed that work on the airport's Hajj terminal is progressing steadily and is expected to be completed in time for the next year's Hajj operation.
The aviation sector has witnessed unprecedented transformation, and this terminal stands as a testament to his unwavering commitment to the development of critical national infrastructure.
Malam Aminu Kano International Airport occupies a strategic position as Nigeria's principal gateway to northern Nigeria. Beyond serving millions of travelers over the years, the airport supports trade, tourism, pilgrimage, and business activities, linking Kano to major cities within Nigeria and international destinations. From Kano, Idris Jibrin, Global Television News.
Away from Kano State, let's go to some judicial matters where the Court of Appeal in Abuja has set aside the Federal High Court judgment directing the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) to deregister the African Democratic Congress (ADC) and 4 other political parties. Justice Abba Mohammed, who delivered the lead judgment, held that the decision of the Federal High Court was of no consequences and therefore cannot stand. Our judicial correspondent, Ubon Usoro, was there for Global TV.
The controversy dates back to the aftermath of the 2023 general elections, when a suit was filed seeking the deregistration of some political parties over their performance at the polls. In an earlier ruling, the Federal High Court in Abuja ordered INEC to deregister the African Democratic Congress, Action People's Party, Action Alliance, Accord Party, and Zenith Labour Party. Dissatisfied with the judgment, the affected parties headed to the Court of Appeal. In a unanimous decision delivered by a 3-member panel led by Justice Abba Mohammed, the appellate court set aside the judgment, holding that the lower court lacked the jurisdiction to entertain the matter. The court further held that the trial judge acted without judicial authority by delivering judgment despite an existing order of the Court of Appeal directing a stay of proceedings, including the delivery of judgment. Counsel to the political parties, Barrister Maxwell Okpara, welcomed the decision, describing it as a reaffirmation of the rule of law and the authority of superior courts.
So just like we said, the appeal will be heard on the 17th of August. Then thereafter, we'll now take it up from there. And I also want to use this opportunity to ask all those people that are being used to frustrate this democracy.
The appellate court also ruled that the plaintiff who instituted the suit lacked the legal standing to do so, adding that the trial court's decision was inconsistent with the provision of Section 225A of the 1999 Constitution as amended. It consequently declared the judgment of the Federal High Court null and void. Reacting to the verdict, counsel to the Action People's Party, Peter Abang, described the judgment as a victory for democracy and the rule of law, stressing that all courts must respect the hierarchy of the Nigerian judicial system.
The learned justices of the Court of Appeal for painstakingly taking time to go through the issue that has to do with registration of political party. When some people who are looking for a way to get some political party out of the way so that it can be easier for them to perhaps rig election in 2027, when they have attempted to see how to register political parties.
The ruling means that the African Democratic Congress, Action People's Party, Action Alliance, Accord Party, and Zenith Labour Party remain legally recognized and retain their registration unless overturned through any subsequent legal process. The decision is expected to have far-reaching implications for the Nigeria's political landscape as political parties intensify preparations for the 2027 general elections. Ubong Usoro, Global TV News.
And of course, there you have it. You've seen the report from the. Let's have our correspondent, Ubong Usoro, speak to us on this issue. We're standing by there. Hello, Ubong. It's good to have you join me on the reporter today. How have you been? Issue. A lot of concerns were raised around the issue of the opposition party ahead of the 2027 general election. Should courts, political actors, or INEC have the final say on whether a political party should be deregistered in Nigeria from your perspective as a correspondent?
Scenarios where elections will not be concluded without being challenged at different courts, right from the High Court up onto the Supreme Court, and it doesn't really speak well about democracy. And now what we are now seeing is even the other actors are challenging the registration of political parties. Mind you, this was not a suit filed by INEC. It was a suit filed by former legislators who felt that some of these parties did not meet up the 2023, guidelines or criteria that was set by INEC. Remember that some years ago, in 2011 and 2015, we had political parties deregistered. There were times in our country where we had about 112, 121 political parties. Many of those political parties have been deregistered because of the INEC guidelines that says political parties should win election. So what this suit was challenging was that Zenith Labour Party, Accord Party, ADC, and the rest of the parties did not meet up that criteria. But it's also bastardizing our electionary system because already these vehicles have proven to be vehicles where Nigerians want to use to contest. So if we now deregister them, what happens to the fate of Nigerians that have bought forms, bought tickets, and already gotten, nominations from these political parties?
You've said like this is not a fair play for the political system or the space to practice politics as it may be. But let's look at it. What impact will the appeal court's decision to restore the ADC and 4 other parties have on political competition ahead of the 2027 general election? Because of course, Nigerians or the electorate were waiting to have competitive space where they have choices in terms of who they would want to be in governance or govern the affairs of the nation.
Right. For me, I think that it shouldn't be a matter of, let's see, political parties have to go to court before. Political parties are registered entities. They have their rights as enshrined by the constitution of the country, right? So they should know, and the masses should also hold them responsible. So I think it's also a wake-up call for other political parties that go back, look at the INEC guidelines, make sure that you've done everything within your power to stay afloat. So when that happens, right, you will not fall short of the law. So the political parties themselves have a lot to do, and the citizens themselves should continue to hold them accountable. But one thing I will say, Anita, is that we will never get to a place where our civic space will be so shredded and will now get to have a one-party system. It cannot happen. Multi-party democracy is what we practice in our country, and that is what we'll keep practicing.
That you carry shows we want a safe space for democracy to thrive. But most people are concerned, every lot of citizens are worried ahead of 2027 election that questions are asked, does this judgment strengthen Nigeria's democracy and the rule of law, because you mentioned the issue around the law, or does it expose weaknesses in the country's electoral and judicial process? Because of course we know the judicial process is where the final fate stands in terms of issues, and the electoral process is where it gives access to choices by citizens. What does this judgment expose? The democracy and rule of law, or the weaknesses around electoral process and judicial process as well?
Yeah, I think that it will strengthen our democracy, because now this morning I spoke with the Deputy National Police Secretary of the ADC, and she was telling me that she will be so happy to see the NDC on the ballot. She wants to see all the political parties on the ballot, right? So it strengthens our system, and it gives people room. Remember that already the big political parties, the forms are very costly. So if you cannot have these other small alternatives, small in quotes, now no disrespect meant for any political party. Now, if you cannot have these other parties on the ballot where you can get forms for House of Assembly for, let's say, ₦1 million, what now happens to the hope of the common man, right? Because we've seen people get on these platforms that seem not to be popular, and are still able to win elections. We've seen the late senator that died from Anambra Central, right? He was from the ZLP. At the time, the ZLP wasn't really known. So we've seen people, SDP governorship candidates as one governorship in this country, right? We've seen Labour Party, Adams Oshomole, Mimiko, the rest of them. So if we cannot have these other platforms as viable platforms for Nigerians, so it raises question of how our civic space is expanding or is shrinking. So I really am excited to see all of them get on the ballot for 2027.
Your hope is built around a lot of opportunities and platforms for civic space. Just like you said, Nigerians are also rooting for such enabling environments. But let's hope and keep our fingers crossed and see what happens or how it pans out ahead of the 2027 general election. Thank you so much, Ubo, for your time. Always a pleasure having you speak to me on issues around these matters and politics. And of course, judicial matters, like you always do. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
So let's turn our focus and talk about issues from the diaspora, where the federal government has appealed to South Africa to take decisive action to end recurring Afrophobic attacks against Nigerians and other African nationals. This appeal was made in Abuja by the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Shola Eni-Kanalaye, while receiving the South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, who visited as special envoy of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Ramsey Enokagbo, has more.
Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Shola Eni-Kanalaye said President Bola Ahmed Tinubu directed the meeting to address the growing concern over the attacks. He recalled Nigeria's support for South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle and stressed that criminal suspects should be prosecuted through the courts, not subjected to mob justice. While expressing concern over reports that some attacks occurred in the presence of security personnel, the minister warned that continued Afrophobic attacks could strain relations between both countries and undermine their shared commitment to advancing Africa's interests through platforms such as the G20 and the BRICS. He, however, expressed optimism that sustained dialogue would strengthen bilateral ties and promote African unity.
Found that the preponderant victims of this ugly situation are Africans and Nigerians in particular. So we appreciate the warm sentiment you have expressed. We also reciprocate our desire for us to maintain excellent relations and take urgent concrete measures, not just to build confidence, but to address this ongoing Afrophobic attack, of which we thought enough it's got to stop.
In his response, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, reaffirmed his country's long-standing friendship with Nigeria. He described Nigeria's support during the anti-apartheid struggle as a sacrifice South Africans would never forget, and reiterated President Ramaphosa's commitment to tackling xenophobia, racism, and all forms of intolerance, while pledging stronger cooperation between both nations.
Across the continent, migration remains a huge challenge that all of us have to work together to address. As one of the receiving countries in the continent, we owe it to the protocols of the African Union that requires regular migration and not irregular and disorderly migration.
As Nigeria and South Africa work to preserve their historic partnership, both sides addressing Afrophobic attacks and promoting mutual respect remain critical to building a united and prosperous Africa where citizens can live, work, and thrive without fear. Ramsey Enoch, Agbo Global TV News.
And of course, joining me in the studio right now to speak on this issue, because it's one issue that has been in the front burner, is our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Ramsey Enoch Agbo. It's good to have you join me in the studio.
Thank you very much, Anita.
It's been one conversation in and out around this xenophobic attack for Nigerians, especially for those who've lost their loved ones over time. And seeing this envoy coming to visit Nigeria, can Nigeria and South Africa truly strengthen bilateral relationships if we're following these reoccurring attacks from the South Africa region towards Nigeria?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's unfortunate because it's like the memory of the South African people was wiped out. They didn't remember who Nigeria has been to them as a big brother in Africa. And that's the reason they went that far. Lives were lost. Lives were lost. I think a few days ago, we still lost someone else. I was at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think a few days ago, speaking with the spokesperson. Then they've arrived, all right, the envoy from Ramaphosa have arrived, but then the president was not ready to receive them at that point in time, and he couldn't say much about that until later. They now met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs for State. And as it is right now, you talked about relationship as something that is at stake as it is. And what's even at the National Assembly, a lot of people are pushing, not really confiscating, all right, South African establishments in Nigeria per se. Senator Adams of Shimole have made some proposals and some persons have supported it. But the federal government, being the big brother of Africa, wanted to trade, as it is right now, trading the path of peace. And that's the reason this envoy were given attention at the end of the day. But what is still going to happen at the end of the day, there should be a compensation. And South Africans would be meant to understand the gravity of what has happened. This is not even xenophobia anymore. This is Afrophobic, because it's Afrophobia. as it is right now, because this is an African thing, and I wonder what the white man, the other people in Europe and others are thinking about us.
So talking about the putting an end to all of this, so I'm wondering, just like you said, life have been lost, a lot of concerns. Sure. So when we ask, this is now Afrophobic, which is really a thing of concern within the African region. So what concrete steps do you think the South African government need to take to talk to their people, in terms of that South Africans now, to put an end to this recurring issue, because it's becoming an unresolved dilemma that we see as for African brothers, which is not something that should be, just like you said, to the Western world?
Yes, of course. Some people are saying this might have a political origin because the government didn't speak until lately, right? So some Africans were thinking, if the government were trying to please the people because of politics, the next election, you know, and they allow all of this happen. But then I think what the government should do, sending envoy to Nigeria is important. They've done that. That is treading the path of peace. And of course, Nigeria on their own part have received the envoy. The Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Anekolai, have actually received the envoy, and of course they've spoken. In coming days, we'll see what will be the outcome of the discussion. The discussion never ended.
It can't never end because
it's not ended yet.
So I'm looking at it from this perspective. Should African leaders adopt a continent-wide strategy to combat this whole idea? Because which is part of the exercise we'll see with envoys going from country to country. That's South African envoy going to speak on this issue, because xenophobic is violence against fellow Africans, and that's a deep one, because you can keep stabbing your brother if you want.
It's wrong in all ramification. It's wrong, and I was excited when Ghana and Nigeria raised the issue at the ECOWAS meeting, and AU is taking it up.
Of course, they should.
A committee have been set up to look into it, and that's the reason I said it's not ending anytime soon, because lives were lost, and bilateral relations and diplomatic relations is also at stake. So we're just expecting something good anyway. We are the big brothers of Africa. We're ready to take so many things.
Thank you so much, Ramsey. And if we keep talking, of course, this issue never ends until we get solution attached. So thank you so much for your time on the reporter. We hope to get more details as time unfolds.
Thank you, Anita.
Amazing. Well, it's been an amazing conversation here on the reporter, from the different states and then back to judicial matters, and of course on the foreign scene, where we'll talk about religion, Afrophobic, which is a deep concern for the African region. And of course, that brings us to the size of the program, The Reporter. Thank you for being a part of the program. A quick reminder here that Global TV is on DSTV channel 365, Star Times channel 276, and on Free TV. We're also active across all social media platforms, now showing on your screen by using @Global TV NG. I am Aniti Patrick. Thank you for watching.
Be mindful of how we use social media. It's not just about the platforms themselves.
Of the national unity and democratic stability.
Water is life, water is an essential service, and we must have to carry out the residents.
Local communities are not only vital to the growth of society, but they also form the bedrock of humanitarian development.